Hi, I want to talk about three main things. I want to talk about the definition of discourse, I want to talk about the project, and then I specifically want to address our prompt. Before I do that, however, I want to play catch up. I have graded all of the rhetorical analyses that you guys uploaded yesterday, and so your scores should have been sent to you. Feel free to take a look at my comments, and as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Now, I think we may need to take a little step back because I know that the article that I asked you guys to peruse last week was a little confusing for some of you, and I completely understand that. And I know some folks went out and started to do the investigation of discourse on their own, and you may have looked up a definition in the dictionary, and it seemed really simple, right? Discourse was just a conversation via language. Right? For other folks, they went onto YouTube and ended up with these really kind of academic, complex understandings. Discourse is how certain institutions exert power and control ways of knowing. Yikes! And so let me be really clear how we're going to be using this term over the next couple of weeks. For us, when we talk about discourse, we're really interested in how individuals or groups use language to say things, to do things, and to be things. And when I say be things, I mean how they construct their identity. And when I say language, for us, that means that we're going to be looking at the words, but it also means that we can look at other sorts of things like the symbols that are being used, or maybe even the gestures or mannerisms that are being used in a given context. And so I hope that that sharpens the definition that we'll be using. Now, what I've done is I've gone ahead and made a cheat sheet based on the article last week, and I've posted it. And so if you want, you can take a look. And I've given you some of the ideas from the text last week, and then I've given you some little examples that I hope clarify. So if you look at the review materials here, you'll see that I've linked that document right there. Now, let's talk a little bit about our project, and let's talk about the prompt. I think the best way to talk about the project may be to look at some of the projects that students have done in the past. And so I've absolutely thrown those at you this week. You can see them on our homepage. And I've also given you a link to a document here where I've provided more explanation. But the point is that I think by looking at some of the titles or the subjects that students have talked about, you may get a better understanding of what I'm asking you to do. And so, as an example, let's take a look at one of the projects that a student did. A student did an analysis of American yoga, and in that paper, the student took the discourse of yoga, right? And the student decided that she was going to analyze a few yoga studios in and around North County and look at the language and the practices. And so she was able to discover that they used language in ways that moved away from necessarily religious understandings of yoga and more to an understanding of yoga as health and beauty. She also looked at how certain symbols became really important. For example, the type of pants that one wore to a yoga class. And so in that paper, the students started to analyze the discourse of yoga. I call it American yoga, right, because she was doing it here, and then was able to draw some conclusions about how, for example, the economic system has altered or modified yoga from how it may be practiced in India to how it's being practiced here. So there's just a little example of a project a student has done. And so what I ask you to do this week is take a look at this little document, look at the titles, let those titles simmer for a little while, read some of the explanations I've provided, and I hope that that helps move you in a direction so that you have an understanding of what you'll be doing over the next couple of weeks. Of course, you can also take a look at these sample projects that I've linked to here, so you can see what we're producing. Now, finally, I want to talk briefly about the prompt. And I've tried to make the prompt as straightforward as I can at this point. And really what's happening in this assignment is I'm giving everybody a guide, right? Kind of instructions to follow, if you will. And so the instructions are laid out very clearly right here. I want you to go through a series of steps. First, I want you to kind of figure out what your discourse will be. And then you're going to go collect examples, evidence from your discourse. So if you were going to do the discourse of boot camp, you may get the manual that instructors follow. You may find some of the language that's being used in boot camp. If you were going to do the discourse of I'm trying to think of another. Of tweets, for example, of Trump's tweets, for example, you could just go collect all of these tweets that Trump has sent out, and you would analyze all of those tweets. So the first part is collecting, right? The primary source, the evidence. And then you're going to analyze that, and you're going to look for the patterns and the categories. And in looking at those patterns and categories, you should be able to start to see how this discourse works. And that's where the project for me gets interesting, because now we can start to draw conclusions about the values and the belief systems and the ideologies or the cultural narratives that are the foundation for that discourse. And so that becomes the next step in the process. And then we think about those values and ideologies, and we connect them back to the culture. We think about where they exist in other discourses, or we begin to think about how powerful they might be. And so that's what I'm trying to get everybody to kind of do here, right? Let's start with a real specific discourse that you're interested in. Let's start by analyzing and figuring out these patterns, and then we can move on to larger conversations from there. So that's what I'm getting at here. Finally, with regard to what you actually give me, some of you can easily just give me, 4.5, 5.5 page double-spaced paper. I have no problem with that. You may want to include visuals, right? Because you may be taking screenshots of tweets, for example. And so you can include that in your project. And others, you may want to put it together in a different way. I have no problem with people putting this paper together on a Google Doc with images. If you would want to use a WordPress or create a blog, you can go ahead and do that. I'm trying to create a space for you guys to do some analytical thinking and some analytical work, but to also hopefully have a little bit of a fun time in doing it. So I hope this gives you a general overview of where we're headed over the next couple of weeks. If you got questions, let me know. Take good care.